She lived among the pigs, nameless, forgotten by the village that chose to call her crazy, rather than acknowledge what they did to her. But that late afternoon, an Apache saw her. He didn't say anything. He just returned at night with a blanket and a gesture. What happened next divided the village and rekindled questions that many wanted to bury. Watch until the end and discover why that woman ceased to be silence and came to be called the one who returned from the ground. Subscribe to the channel and learn about this real story of reparation. In a forgotten corner of Boa Vista Farm, in the flooded lands of the Brazilian Pantanal, surrounded by mud, horseflies, and rotting food scraps, lived a woman who no longer answered to any name. Her body was too thin for the 30-something years she must have been, and her eyes, which once shone with the vivacity of youth, now only avoided any contact. There, among the wild pigs and capybaras that roamed the swamp, she was kept as punishment for having dared to say no. Sebastião Mendonça, an influential farmer in the region, owner of 3,000 head of cattle and half of the productive lands in the municipality of Porto Jofre, had been publicly rejected during the São João festival when he proposed marriage to Iracema, daughter of the former foreman. Before the entire village and important guests, she refused his hand and his possessions, declaring that she preferred the simple life with the one she truly loved. Humiliated, the farmer waited for the right moment for his revenge. It took just 3 weeks and an accusation of witchcraft for Iracema's fate to be sealed. A cow that miscarried, some chickens that died without explanation, and the priest's youngest son with a high fever were sufficient proof. They called her a witch. They said she was impure, and no one questioned when Sebastião ordered her to be tied up and taken to the swamp. It was easier to believe that she deserved that life than to confront the power of the colonel. For 6 long months she fed on scraps thrown to the ground by the farmhands, covered only by rags and by the complicit silence of a frightened community. That same day, as happened at the beginning of each rainy season, a riverside dweller named Damião had arrived at the farm to trade medicinal herbs and roots that only grew in the highlands. A man of few words, son of a quilombola and an indigenous woman, he knew the secrets of the forest like few others. The farmers tolerated him because his herbal remedies cured everything from snake bites to cattle fever. Observant, he spoke little and heard everything. It was late in the afternoon, when he was loading his small boat with the provisions he had traded for, that he noticed a figure crouching beside the swamp enclosure. He stopped. He adjusted his straw hat to better see in the orange light that tinted the horizon. He didn't ask the farmhands accompanying him anything. He just looked. The human figure, almost indistinguishable from the animals around it, also saw him but didn't react. She went back to slowly chewing a piece of rotten cassava, as if she no longer knew what to expect from anyone. The farmhands noticed his interest. "Don't waste your time, Damião. That one there is the witch. She messed with things she shouldn't have, and now she's paying the price." Damião didn't reply. In his people, in the riverside community of Espírito Santo, 12 hours by canoe, from there nobody called anyone a witch. They knew the power of plants, the cycle of the moon, the strength of prayer. They knew that fear transforms the unknown into a threat. He said goodbye with a nod and departed in the small boat down the Cuiabá River. But the image of that woman did not leave him during the entire journey. That night, while the community slept, Damião prepared in silence. He set aside a thick cotton blanket that his mother had woven, filled a gourd with fresh water, gathered cooked cassava, a handful of healing herbs, and a bottle of sugarcane molasses. He collected some simple clothes that belonged to his deceased sister. Without telling anyone, not even the old matriarch Dona Zuleide, he took his canoe and rowed against the current, guided only by the silver light filtering through the heavy clouds. He arrived at Boa Vista Farm when everyone had already retired. He tied the canoe to a fallen trunk and, stepping with the lightness of someone who grew up hunting in the forest, approached the swamp. The fine rain that was beginning to fall would be his ally, muffling any noise. The woman was huddled under a piece of torn tarpaulin, shivering. When she sensed his approach, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just curled up even more, like a cornered animal that already knows the taste of violence. Damião crouched down. Slowly, he extended the gourd with water. "Drink," he whispered. After a moment of hesitation, she took the container with trembling hands and drank, eagerly. "Come with me," he said, as he unfolded the blanket. "No one deserves to live like this." Without waiting for a response, he wrapped her in the cloth, lifted her in his arms, and walked back to the canoe. She weighed as little as a child. She smelled of mud and despair. Her body, still rigid with fear, was carefully placed in the boat. Damião covered her with another blanket to protect her from the rain that was getting heavier, and began to row forcefully, leaving behind the farm and its barbed wire. The woman didn't say a word during the entire journey. She just observed the dark sky, as if she couldn't believe she was far from that enclosure. Every now and then, Damião offered her water or a piece of cassava, which she accepted with mechanical gestures. When the rain intensified, he improvised a cover with palm leaves, protecting her as best he could. For hours, they navigated the meanders of the river, moving further and further away from Boa Vista Farm. Damião knew every curve, every sandbank, every dangerous stretch. He rowed with the certainty of someone who knows that sometimes the only possible act of justice is the one done with one's own hands. Dawn was already advancing when they sighted the first stilt houses of the Espírito Santo community. The Ainchihun wooden houses, built on stilts to escape the river floods, seemed to dream at the water's edge. On the horizon, a thin line was beginning to separate the night from the new day being born, bringing the uncertain promise of a new beginning. Upon arriving at the community, curious gazes were already waiting at the riverside. Even at such an unusual hour, the news that Damião was returning earlier than expected had spread quickly among the 16 families that formed the riverside Quilombo of Espírito Santo. The older men held kerosene lamps that danced against the remaining darkness, while women with sleepy children in their arms formed a silent line of waiting. When they saw the huddled figure under the blanket, the murmurs began. "Who is it?" asked Seu Benedito, a respected fisherman and informal counselor of the community. "A woman who needed help," Damião replied, simple and direct, while tying the canoe to the small wooden dock. Dona Zuleide, a 73-year-old matriarch whose calloused hands had midwifed 3 generations of the Quilombo, made her way through the curious onlookers. She was short, very dark-skinned, with white hair pulled back in a firm bun. Her eyes, framed by deep wrinkles, analyzed the situation with the wisdom that only age brings. "Where does she come from?" she questioned, approaching the canoe. "From me, Boa Vista Farm," Damião replied, helping the woman out of the boat. "She was living in the swamp with the pigs." The revelation made some retreat. "From Sebastião Mendonça's farm?" asked Tião, one of the young men of the community. "You've brought trouble for us, Damião. That man doesn't forgive." Others agreed. Colonel Sebastião was known for his cruelty and influence. He had sheriffs and politicians in his pocket. If he discovered that someone had interfered with his revenge, retaliation would be certain. "He's right," added Maria do Carmo, pressing her 2-year-old daughter against her chest. "And what if what they say is true? What if she really is a witch?" Dona Zuleide raised her hand, silencing everyone. She approached the woman who could barely stand, supported by Damião. The matriarch gently held her chin, raising her face to the light of the lamp. What she saw were dull, lifeless eyes, but still human. A face devastated by exposure, covered in dried mud and small wounds. But she also saw something else. On her wrists, rope marks. "She is not a witch," the old woman declared. "She's just a woman who said no to someone who isn't accustomed to hearing that word." She turned to the other women present. "Januaria, Celeste, come help me. Take her to my house. And you, Damião," she pointed her bony finger at the man, "be at the meeting at dawn to explain what you did." Damião just nodded. 2 middle-aged women stepped forward and carefully supported the stranger, taking her towards Dona Zuleide's house, the largest and oldest of the stilt houses. The matriarch followed them, but not before giving a final look to the small crowd. "Return to your homes. Tomorrow we will decide what to do." In the wooden house illuminated by oil lamps, Januaria and Celeste followed the old woman's instructions. They heated water on the wood stove while separating ash soap and copaiba oil. Carefully, they undressed the woman of her filthy rags. What they saw beneath the cloths made Celeste bring her hand to her mouth to contain a scream. The body was covered with open wounds, some infected. The ribs protruded under the dirty skin, and animal bite marks dotted her legs and arms. "Mother of Heaven," whispered Januaria, crossing herself. With delicacy, the three women washed every inch of that battered body. Donna Zuleide prepared an herbal infusion, purple ivy bark, guaco leaves, burdock root, and cleaned the wounds while murmuring ancient prayers learned from her grandmother. Throughout the process, the woman did not utter a single sound. She only occasionally trembled, her eyes always alert to every movement, as if expecting that at any moment the gentleness would turn into punishment. "What shall we call her?" asked Celeste, while helping to dress the woman in a clean nightgown. "She already has a name," Donna Zuleide replied, "but she will only tell it when she trusts us." They accommodated her on a soft mat, covered by an embroidered cotton sheet. Donna Zuleide offered a fish broth with cassava, which the woman drank slowly, as if she had forgotten how to use a spoon. When she finished, her eyes began to close, overcome by fatigue. For the first time in months, she slept under a roof that wasn't the open sky. The next morning, while the stranger was still sleeping, the community gathered under the large mango tree that served as a location for collective decisions. Excited voices confronted Damião, who remained silent, accepting the criticism. "You've put us at risk," accused Geronimo, one of the most influential men of the Quilombo. "If the colonel finds out, he may send gunmen here. He may demand that you return her." Others agreed. The security of the community, which already lived under constant threat from land grabbers and farmers, now seemed even more fragile. Damião acted on impulse, but he did what his heart commanded, intervened Donna Zuleide. Arriving at the location, supported by her carved wooden cane, "I saw what they did to that woman. Not even an animal deserves such treatment." The old woman told what she had discovered when cleaning the stranger's body. The marks, the wounds, the state of malnutrition. That wasn't justice, it was cruelty. A heavy silence followed her words. Sebastião Pereira, the oldest of the men, cleared his throat before speaking. "We have 3 days until they notice her absence. 3 days to decide if she stays or goes." The others nodded. It was a reasonable deadline. "But in the meantime," the elder completed, "she is under our protection." During those first days, the woman remained in bed most of the time, recovering under the constant care of Donna Zuleide. She drank the teas she was offered, ate small portions of food, let them treat her wounds, but did not speak. Her eyes, however, followed everything. They observed the movements in the house, the children who occasionally peeked through the door, the coming and going of the women. Damião appeared every day, sat at a respectful distance, and told stories. About the river, about the plants, about the legends of the Pantanal. He never asked anything, never demanded a response. He just spoke with his deep and calm voice as if he were talking to the wind. On the third day, when the decisive meeting was approaching, something unexpected happened. Filhote, the mongrel, dog that lived in the community, came limping into Donna Zuleide's house. He had stepped on a tucum thorn, which had buried itself deeply in his paw. The animal whimpered, refusing to let anyone touch the injured spot. It was then that, to everyone's surprise, the woman extended her hand. The dog, normally distrustful, approached her, sniffing her fingers. With a surprisingly agile movement, she held the injured paw, extracted the thorn with her nails, and then licked the wound before blowing on it, murmuring incomprehensible words. Then, as if nothing had happened, she went back to lying down, turning her back to those present. The dog, free from pain, licked her hand once before leaving, now without limping. Donna Zuleide witnessed everything in silence. In the afternoon, when the community gathered again under the mango tree, the matriarch told what she had witnessed. "She has knowledge," she affirmed, "knowledge that comes from the earth, not from evil." Opinions began to change. In the Espírito Santo Quilombo, knowledge about plants and cures was valued, passed down from generation to generation like a treasure. If that stranger possessed such a gift, perhaps her place was really there among them. The final decision came with the sunset. The woman could stay, provided she recovered and contributed to the community. She would be welcomed in Dona Zuleide's house until she could establish herself on her own. Damião, responsible for bringing her, would also be responsible for protecting her should the colonel come looking for her. That night, when the matriarch told the decision to the woman, she saw something she hadn't seen before. A solitary tear descending down the face, still marked by deprivation. And although no word was spoken, that drop of water carried within it the weight of a gratitude that words could not express. The following weeks brought slow transformations. Like a plant that begins to rise again after the storm, the woman was regaining her strength. First, there were hesitant steps around Dona Zuleide's house, then small tasks, helping to peel cassava, sorting seeds, hanging clothes, on the improvised clothesline behind the stilt house. Her hair, which had been cut close to the scalp to eliminate parasites, was beginning to grow again, forming black, shiny curls. Her hands, once trembling, now moved with increasing firmness, but her voice remained guarded, like a treasure that she wasn't yet ready to share. The community observed her evolution with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Some older women left small gifts at Dona Zuleide's door, a wooden comb, an herbal soap, a necklace of colorful seeds. The children, initially forbidden to approach, began to play closer and closer, until one day little Toninho, only 4 years old, offered her a purple quaresmera flower. She accepted the gift with a nod and a slight curl of her lips, the closest to a smile that anyone had seen on her face. Damião appeared regularly, always respecting the space she seemed to need. He brought small, fresh fish, seasonal fruits, sometimes just sat on the step of the house and carved small figures in wood while telling stories of the community's past. She listened to him, always in silence, but her eyes no longer avoided contact. One afternoon, while he was talking about the great flood 5 years ago, she pointed to the sky. Small, dark clouds were beginning to form on the horizon. Damião understood the silent warning and thanked with a nod before leaving to alert the fishermen about the change in the weather. When the rain came 3 hours later, all the boats were already safe. It was a small event, but one that did not go unnoticed by the more observant members of the community. The woman rescued from the swamp knew how to read the signs of nature. The real turning point happened when disaster struck the Quilombo. Manuela, only 6 years old, Januaria's daughter, woke up one morning with a high fever and red spots all over her body. Before noon, 5 other children were showing the same symptoms. Dona Zuleide prepared her herbal remedies and teas, but the fever persisted, rising to alarming levels. The convulsions began on the second day. One of the boys, Pedrinho, 3 years old, was barely breathing, his purplish lips frightening even the calmest individuals. The community fell into despair. The nearest health center was 6 hours away by boat, and with the rain that was falling, the journey would be even more time-consuming and dangerous. It was then that the woman stood up. In a decisive movement, she went to Januaria, who was crying as she held her daughter burning with fever. She extended her arms, asking without words for her to hand over the child. The mother hesitated for a moment, but the stranger's gaze conveyed a certainty that hadn't been seen there for a long time. Januaria handed over Manuela, who could barely keep her eyes open. The woman carried the girl to the riverbank, followed by a procession of anxious parents and curious onlookers. She knelt in the mud of the bank, ignoring the fine rain that was falling, and began to dig with her own hands. She found roots of a plant that grew semi-submerged. She pulled up several of them, and then sought leaves from another herb that few recognized. Back at Dona Zuleide's house, she worked in silence. She ground the roots in a mortar, mixed them with the macerated leaves, and added honey from native bees that Damião kept in a pot. The greenish paste was applied to the children's chests, while a tea of the same mixture, diluted and filtered, was given in small sips. "Wild genipap and herb of the animal," murmured Dona Zuleide, recognizing the ingredients. "Strong medicine. Dangerous if you don't know the right dose." The old woman observed every movement of the woman, noting the precision with which she measured the proportions, using only her fingers as a reference. Throughout the entire night, the stranger did not sleep. She moved from child to child, checking the temperature, adjusting the compresses, offering more of the medicinal tea. Sometimes she hummed softly, a strange and hypnotic melody that seemed to soothe not only the sick little ones, but also the anxious adults who kept vigil next to the mats. When the first ray of clarity streaked across the sky, Manuela opened her eyes. The fever had subsided. Her spots, still visible, no longer seemed so inflamed. One by one, the other children also showed signs of improvement. Pedrinho, the most serious case, was the last to recover. But when he finally managed to sit up and ask for water, a collective sigh of relief ran through the community. The woman collapsed exhausted, finally allowing herself to rest in a corner of the room. She slept for almost an entire day. When she woke up, she found a glass of fresh water and a plate with fish pirão beside her, and also a small crowd patiently waiting at the door. They were mothers, grandmothers, aunts of the children she had saved. They brought gifts, a piece of colorful fabric, a chicken, baskets of fruit. But mainly they brought questions. They wanted to learn. They wanted to know how to identify the plants, how to prepare them, how to administer them. The woman looked at those expectant faces, and for the first time since she had arrived at the Quilombo, she spoke. Her voice came out hoarse from so much time in silence, but the words were clear. "My name is Iracema." A wave of emotion ran through the group. It wasn't just the fact that they finally knew her name. It was the symbolism of that moment. A woman who had been forcibly silenced now chose when and how to use her own voice again. Damião, who was observing the scene from a distance, felt something warm expanding in his chest. It wasn't pride in what he had done, nor satisfaction at having been justified in his decision to rescue her. It was something simpler and at the same time deeper, the certainty that sometimes restoring dignity to someone is the most revolutionary act one can perform. In the days that followed, Iracema began to speak more, although she still preferred silence most of the time. She told fragments of her story. Daughter of a midwife, she had learned about medicinal plants since childhood. She spoke about how she had met the colonel's son, Juvenal, and how they had fallen in love against his father's wishes. She recounted the public humiliation when she rejected Sebastião's marriage proposal, already a widower and determined to have her as a wife after seeing her with his son. She didn't go into details about the months in the swamp, but her eyes darkened whenever that period was mentioned. The community, which had already accepted her as a healer, now respected her also as a survivor. Dona Zuleide, recognizing that her own knowledge of herbs was limited compared to Iracema's, proposed that she assume the role of main healer and blessing giver of the Quilombo. "My eyes no longer see the leaves as before, and my fingers no longer distinguish between one root and another," explained the matriarch. "You have the gift and the knowledge. It is yours by right." To formalize the passage of knowledge, a small ceremony was organized. Under the central mango tree, with the entire community gathered, Dona Zuleide handed Iracema her oldest mortar, made of jequitibar wood, and her herb-cutting machete, whose blade had been sharpened by 4 generations of women. Symbolically, she thus transferred not only tools, but the trust of the community. Meanwhile, a shadow hung over the apparent tranquility achieved. At Boa Vista Farm, Colonel Sebastião Mendonça had noticed the disappearance of his prisoner. Furious, he ordered searches throughout the region, offering a reward for anyone who brought information. The news reached the Quilombo through Joaquim, a traveling salesman who visited both the farm and the riverside communities. "He is determined to find her," he warned during a visit. "He says she fled taking something that belongs to him, Damião." And the other men of the community reinforced their vigilance. They established shifts to watch the river, arranged alert signals, prepared escape routes if necessary. The women began to accompany Iracema when she went out to collect plants, never leaving her alone. Fear once again became part of daily life, but now it was a shared fear, transformed into collective protection. Faced with the threat, Iracema made a decision. One night, she gathered the older women and some interested young ones and began to systematically teach everything she knew. "If something happens to me," she explained, "the knowledge cannot be lost." In a few weeks, she established a routine, of meetings where she identified plants, explained their properties, demonstrated preparation methods. She created a small notebook with detailed drawings of leaves and roots using charcoal and natural dyes extracted from fruits and barks. The effort to preserve and transmit her knowledge transformed into an informal school of traditional medicine, attracting even people from neighboring communities. The news about the healer of the Espirito Santo Quilombo began to spread, first as a whisper among the riverside communities, then as a story told in the fairs and markets of the region. And inevitably, like water that always finds its way, it also reached the ears of Colonel Sebastião Mendonça. The ultimatum arrived on a clear sky morning, carried by 3 armed men who docked at the small pier of the community. They brought a direct message from Colonel Sebastião. He gave 3 days for the fugitive to be returned, or he would send men to burn the entire Quilombo. No one doubted he would fulfill the threat. The men left behind the weight of the countdown and the fire. Community gathered immediately under the mango tree. Excited voices proposed different solutions, from preparing to fight to temporarily abandoning the place. Some, fearing for the safety of their families, suggested handing over Iracema. We are 48 people against a farmer who has armed henchmen and political influence, argued Geronimo. We cannot risk the lives of our children for one person. The debate heated up. Tempers flared. It was then that Iracema, who was watching everything in silence, stood up. I will surrender myself, she declared in a firm voice. A sudden silence fell over the assembly. I cannot allow you to suffer because of me. Damião stepped forward, his eyes fixed on hers. I will not let you go back to that place. I would rather face all the colonel's henchmen alone. His determination was evident in his tense posture, in his clenched fists. Dona Zuleide, supported by her cane, raised her hand asking for the floor. Everyone fell silent to hear the matriarch. Neither will Iracema surrender, nor will we confront the colonel with violence, she declared. There is another way out. She turned to Iracema. What does he say you stole? The healer frowned, confused. I took nothing but my own body. The old woman smiled, revealing the wisdom accumulated. In 7 decades of resistance. Precisely. Your body, your knowledge, your freedom to say no. That's what he wants to recover. She leaned more firmly on her cane and continued. Colonel Sebastião has a weakness that everyone knows, but no one dares to mention. His youngest, son Juvenal, suffers from an illness that no doctor has been able to cure. Attacks that leave him as if dead. Foam at the mouth, rolled back eyes. She looked significantly at Iracema. You know the remedy for this, don't you? The healer nodded slowly, understanding where the matriarch was going. I know. Jurubeba root, bird herb leaf, and jua seed, prepared during the waning moon. But, she hesitated, that means I will have to go to the farm. Not alone, Damião intervened. I will go with you. Dona Zuleide continued explaining her plan. Iracema would prepare the remedy for the colonel's son, but would not deliver it immediately. First, she would demand a formal agreement, signed and witnessed, guaranteeing the safety of the community and her own freedom. Sebastião is cruel, but he loves his son, and he has tried everything to cure him, the matriarch concluded. It's our only chance. The proposal was accepted after long deliberation. For 2 days, Iracema worked tirelessly. She collected the necessary plants, observed the exact position of the moon, prepared the mixture strictly following each step of the process she had learned from her mother. The result was an amber liquid stored in a small glass bottle. On the morning of the 3rd day, she and Damião set off toward Boa Vista Farm. He rode forcefully, while she kept her eyes fixed on the horizon, where the farm buildings were beginning to take shape. Are you sure about this? He asked, noticing the tension in her face. I'm not, admitted Iracema, but I am sure that I cannot let them destroy the place that gave me back my humanity. When they reached the edge of the property, they were immediately surrounded by armed henchmen. They were taken directly to the big house, an imposing 2-story building with wide verandas and tall windows. Colonel Sebastião was waiting in the main room, seated in an armchair that looked more like a throne. He was a stocky man, with a well-trimmed graying beard and eyes as cold as river stones. "Finally decided to return to the place you belong," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Irasima held his gaze without lowering her head. "I didn't come to stay. I came because I heard your son needs help." The colonel's smile disappeared. "Who told you about Juvenal?" Without answering directly, she raised the bottle with the remedy. "This can cure him, permanently." Greed for what he wanted and distrust fought in the farmer's face. Finally, the former won. "How do I know it's not poison?" "Because I could have poisoned him a long time ago when I still lived in that swamp," she replied simply. "And because I am willing to drink from the same remedy before giving it to him." The demonstration of confidence seemed to convince the colonel. He called one of the employees and ordered him to bring his son. Moments later, a young man of approximately 20 years entered the room, supported by a housekeeper. He was pale, thin with deep dark circles, and a permanent expression of exhaustion. When he saw Irasima, his eyes widened in recognition. "You came back," he murmured. A flash of guilt crossed his young face. "I shouldn't have let him do that to you." Sebastio interrupted abruptly. "Be quiet, Juvenal. It's not time for that." He turned to Irasima. "What is your price for?" "The remedy." She took a deep breath before answering. "The safety of the Espirito Santo community. A document signed by you, recognized in a notary's office, guaranteeing that you will never attack or harm them, and my freedom to come and go like any person." The colonel laughed. "Do you really think I am afraid of a bunch of blacks living by the river? That I need to promise not to attack them?" "It's not a matter of fear," Damião intervened, speaking for the first time. "It's a matter of choice. You can choose your son's health or your revenge. You cannot have both." A tense silence followed his words. Juvenal took a step forward, trembling. "Father, please, I'm tired of suffering. If she can help me." Sebastio looked at his son, then at Irasima, and finally at Damião. Anger and wounded pride fought against paternal love. At last, he signaled to one of his henchmen, "Bring paper and ink and send for the notary from the city." The following hours were of tense negotiation. The document was drafted, each word carefully chosen to leave no loopholes. The notary, a nervous man who clearly feared displeasing the colonel, witnessed and registered the agreement. When everything was formalized, Irasima handed over the remedy. First, she drank a small sip to prove there was no danger. Then she instructed Juvenal on how to take the rest in specific doses over 7 days. "You cannot miss any day," she warned, "and you need to avoid pork and alcoholic beverages for a month." The young man nodded, clinging to that hope like a castaway. To a piece of wood. Before leaving, Irasima faced Colonel Sebastio's gaze one last time. "One day, when pride no longer clouds your vision, perhaps you will understand that no one can possess another person, neither for love nor for power." The farmer did not respond, but something in his eyes, a mixture of anger, reluctant respect, and confusion, suggested that the words had found some crack in his armor of arrogance. The journey back to the Quilombo was silent. Irasima and Damião, side by side in the canoe, processed what had happened, the unspoken words between them weighing more than any conversation. When they finally sighted the first stilt houses, the entire community was waiting on the bank, tense and hopeful. Dona Zuleide stepped forward, her wrinkled face a silent question. Irasima raised the sealed document. "We are protected, all of us." The news spread like wildfire in dry straw. Hugs, tears of relief, nervous laughter. That night, a celebration was organized. Drums sounded, food was shared, stories told around the fire. Irasima, sitting a little apart, observed everything with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. She still couldn't fully believe that she was free, that she would never return to that swamp, that her knowledge, as what they had tried to use to condemn her, had been the instrument of her liberation. Damião approached, offering a gourd with ginger beer. He sat down beside her, saying nothing, just sharing the moment. After a long silence, he spoke. "My grandmother used to say that broken people are like cracked clay pots. When mended with gold, they become stronger and more beautiful than before. She looked at him, a slight smile drawing on her lips. I am not a pot, Damião. I am a river. I can be dammed, diverted, even polluted, but I will always find a way to keep flowing. He nodded, recognizing the profound truth of those words. In the following weeks, life gradually found a new rhythm. Iracema fully assumed her role as healer of the community, but expanded her activities. She began to receive people from distant places, river dwellers, small farmers, even city dwellers. Her name became known throughout the region as the woman who heals. The remedy for juvenile worked. The attacks ceased completely, and the young man regained his health and color. In gratitude, he sent gifts to the Quilombo, a new boat, tools, seeds, fabrics. His father, Colonel Sebastião, kept his distance, strictly complying with the agreement, but never showing any repentance or reconciliation. A year after her rescue from the swamp, Iracema completed the construction of her own house in the community. It was a simple stilt house, but airy and bright, with a veranda facing the river. On the day of the inauguration, the entire community helped transport her belongings, the few pieces of furniture, the many dried plants hung in bundles, the books she had begun to collect. Damião brought a special gift, a sign carved in IP wood for the entrance. It read, House of Iracema, the one who returned from the waters. Seeing it, the healer smiled. I thought it sounded nicer than the one who returned from the ground, he explained, a bit embarrassed. She touched the carefully sculpted letters, feeling the texture of the wood under her fingers. It's perfect, she replied, because it was in the waters of this river that I was reborn. That night, sitting on the veranda of the new house, observing the reflection of the moon on the Cuiabá River, Iracema finally shared with Damião the rest of her story. Not just the horrors of the swamp, but also her childhood, her old dreams, her present fears. He listened to everything without interrupting, only holding her hand when tears made speech impossible. When she finished, he told his own story, the loss of his parents as a child, his adoption by the community, his role as a mediator between different worlds. They didn't speak of future or of promises, only of truths lived and acknowledged. Time went by, the seasons succeeded one another. The Espírito Santo community thrived. The School of Traditional Medicine, founded by Iracema, attracted learners from various regions. The knowledge that was almost lost in the swamp was now recorded, preserved, expanded. The children grew up healthy, protected not only by herbs and blessings, but by the sense of belonging and value that Iracema's story had planted in each heart. As for Damião and Iracema, they built something that had no name or definition, a partnership based on respect, trust, and mutual admiration. They didn't always agree. Sometimes they went days without seeing each other, each absorbed in their own responsibilities. But they always came back to each other, like the river that always returns to the sea. On a particularly hot afternoon, while they were organizing a new bed of medicinal plants behind her house, Iracema suddenly stopped. She looked at her own hands, now strong and steady, sunk in the fertile soil. Then at Damião's hands, calloused by years of work on the river and in the forest. And finally at the horizon, where the intense green of the Pantanal met the deep blue of the sky. Did you know that 3 years ago when you found me in that swamp, I thought you were going to kill me? She confessed. He looked at her, surprised. Why? Because I could no longer imagine that someone would look at me and see a human being, she replied with simplicity. You were the first to really see me after such a long time. Damião absorbed her words in silence. Then he extended his soil-covered hand and lightly touched her face. I didn't do anything extraordinary, he finally said. Just what any person should do upon finding another lost in the mud. Extend a hand and say, let's go home. Iracema smiled, her eyes reflecting not only the light of the present, but also the shadow of the overcome past and the promise of the future she had chosen to build. And that's what we do every day, isn't it? Each time we heal someone, each time we teach a new plant, each time we tell our story, we are saying to those who need to hear, there is a way back. There is a home to return to. Together, they continued planting, herbs to heal, flowers to cheer, trees to shade those who would come after. And in each seed deposited in the earth there was the silent certainty that even from the darkest place a new life can be born. Even from the deepest suffering, the strength to begin again can sprout. Even from the dirtiest mud can emerge the most resilient form of beauty. If this story touched your heart and you believe in the power of resilience and healing, share it with those who need to hear that there is always a way back. Comment below which part moved you the most and subscribe to the channel.